If you would like a free newsletter on this or other subjects, just give us a call at Christian Answers. The phone number is area code 512-218-8022. That's 512-218-8022. Or you could email us at cdebater@aol.com. That's cdebater@aol.com. Thank you.
In your hearts, set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Welcome to Christian Answers Live, an outreach of Christian Answers Incorporated, a nationwide apologetics ministry dedicated to defending those essential truths found in the Bible, dedicated to giving Christian answers. And now, from the studios of KIXL Radio in Austin, Texas, here are your hosts, Lee Meckley and Jim Tungate.
Alien that you claim you married some 12, 13 years ago. Okay. Do you live with him? I mean, does he come home after a hard day at the space base and put his feet up at night?
Stop
I mean,
right there, Andy, with your sense of humor. We're going to get nowhere if we go talking that way. Okay, I did hear the voice of God when I was 12 years old as I was praying for my dog, Jack. And then I heard them when I was 22 again. I am way over that at this time today. And I began seeing the light of their craft, several nights in a row behind my home over in Barrington, Rhode Island. And then as I was, that same year, 75, I was praying, and I heard someone answer me in a simple term, I am your God, what do you wish, I am here. And I kept hearing this every time I was praying. This was in December. I began hearing them very simply, as I just addressed, and we are your God. And I asked, who was speaking to me, and he had given me his name. And then I said, they gave me the vision of their craft over the river, which I see very often. And I asked who else was based here. I had heard about UFOs going into the ocean and not coming up. And I had theorized that several people, there's other life in our solar system. And they said Jupiter. And I believed that they were the voice of God immediately because it's time for the return of Jesus or his kingdom come in these times today. We are going into the age of Aquarius, the age of revision, of a age of new concept. Our celestial brothers want recognition as the voice of God and no other God. The creator of the universe is unknown. And I understood this immediately also, and this is why I was assigned to this mission to introduce them as the kingdom of God to our people. And again, they required a woman, and I was very attracted to my teacher, Commander Locke Felcher, who is their #1 informer. And he and I were unified by the Lord in reign today, Commander Juro Engelwer, again addressing a mortal God of the ninth order of evolution, which is the highest in the universe. So this is how I got my mission. And it refers to my mission in John 14 and 16, where Jesus said, you will see me no more, but another informer will come and speak as he hears. And this is my mission today. I was assigned by Jupiter Tri-Systems of the highest officials in January 1976.
And
how I wear my title today, Goddess Irena 1.
And you believe you are the other. You believe you're that other informer.
Yes, sir. This is what they tell me, and this is what I've done for the past 16 years.
Okay, Bill.
UFOs, extraterrestrials, close encounters, communion. You might think that this woman is a somewhat deranged oddity that you don't run across very often, but you cannot turn on your TV, turn on your radio, or walk outside without hearing about UFOs and the life beyond and what they mean to us. Good afternoon and welcome to Christian Answers Live. I'm Lee Meckley, Director of Radio Outreach for Christian Answers, along with Jim Tungate, who is our Director of Research and Editor of the Christian Answers Journal. Good afternoon. We have a very busy show for you this afternoon, a very interesting show, a very relevant show. In our first hour, we're going to be talking about UFOs. In fact, the clip that you just heard was actually a debate between our guest and this
Space goddess.
Yes, space goddess. Our guest this afternoon is Bill Al-Nour, and we'll be talking to him in just a little bit. Yes, this is something that is a lot of ink has been spilled over the discussion of UFOs and Christianity. They would seem to be opposed. They would seem to be coming from completely different worldviews. But as we heard in this last clip, there are people who seem to want to mix the two.
Right.
There's many people that seem to think that it's one and the same.
Right.
Well, we're going to find out about that this afternoon. Our guest is Bill Al-Nour. He is an award-winning journalist and author and cult expert. He has written more than 500 magazine articles on religious cults, the New Age movement, and Satanism. He's one of the most influential religion writers in America. He is executive director of North American Fellowship, Evangelical Ministries to New Religions, or EMNR, which is an umbrella group that sponsors yearly national conferences and assists cult ministries. Joining Bill on the board of EMNR are representatives from the Christian Research Institute, Watchman Fellowship, Personal Freedom Outreach, Cornerstone Magazine, and also Dr. James Bjornstad and of the King's College, Dr. Gordon Lewis of Denver Seminary, and Dr. Wayne House are also on that board. Bill Al-Nour is also the founder and president of Eastern Christian Outreach, which is an East Coast-based Christian apologetics and cult evangelism ministry, and ECHO produces Echo. I didn't. They had that. They had that capitalized or not capitalized, such I didn't catch the significance of that. Echo produces the Christian Sentinel news magazine. So, Bill, how are you this afternoon? Bill, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
How are you this afternoon?
Oh, great. I could hear you, but I guess you couldn't hear me. I'm doing fine. It's nice to be on with both you, Lee, and Jim also.
We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this.
Now, we just played a clip coming into the show, which was a debate between you and the space goddess. Could you briefly describe your encounter? I don't know if I want to use that word or not. Your encounter with a
close encounter with a space goddess.
Well, that was arranged by WMCA of Andy Anderson in the talk show. She sent in a clipping to that radio station. It's near New York City. I think it was out of some strange supermarket tabloid talking about her story, and she kept bugging him to get on the show. And he says, I'm not going to have you on unless I can have a Christian on to refute what you're saying. And she said, sure. So we went at it for about an hour. It was a rather humorous interview in many ways. Ironically, our ministry sells that tape, and it's become our bestseller. And it's sensational. It kind of says, it kind of shows where people's minds are at, wanting to hear the most sensational tape we have. That's the only debate I ever had with an alien, or someone who claimed to be married to an alien.
She had a very interesting spin on the upper room discourse as well.
Yes, she did.
Well, we'll get into that. We're coming up on a break right now, so we will be talking about this debate. We'll be talking about your book, UFOs in the New Age, extraterrestrial messages, and the truths of Scripture. All of that coming up right after this break. You're listening to Christian Answers Live.
You think she's demon-possessed?
I know that she is demon-possessed.
Okay, Irena, what do you think of that?
There are demons walking around among us that kill people every day. There is no such thing as the devil, and we know not what created the universe. Our celestial brothers have been our voice of guidance for hundreds of years and gave us Jesus. Their message is, we are your God.
Irena, what do you do with the first chapter of the book of the Bible, of Genesis, where God says he created everything? What do you do with that?
There isn't. Oh, well, I'd like to speak. The Bible, of course, was written by man. We know not what created the universe. That is a fallacy. There is a misconstruence between the creator of the universe and the voice of God. The voice of God comes from Jupiter, our celestial brothers, and the creator of the universe is unknown. That's why Jesus kept addressing himself as the Son of Man, and he tried to sum up by mentioning the other prophets as Elijah and Moses standing beside him. That is a figure of speech. He was trying to inform his people at that time that they were the voice of God and that Tri-Systems was the kingdom of the heavens.
Okay, Bill?
Man is good and evil on this planet Earth and every planet that man reigns in the universe. This is why there has to be dominance on a planet of people, They just can't evolve out of the sea like wild weeds.
Okay, Irena, let's give Bill a
commandment.
chance. Bill?
Yeah, first.
Thus spoke Irena, the space goddess. She knows that no one knows who created the universe. Welcome back to Christian Answers Live. I'm Lee Meckley, and with me is Jim Tungate, and we're talking about UFOs, extraterrestrial beings, and space visitors. Our guest is Bill Al-Nour, and I forgot to mention the last segment that he's also been a guest on NBC's 2020 program, Inside Edition, and Fox Broadcasting's A Current Affair television show, so he's kind of made the circuit himself. And this is a very popular subject on the circuit. This is something that we hear from quite a bit.
It seems like almost on a daily basis. You know, you can cut on to some talk show and they'll be talking about UFOs or abduction cases and so forth.
In fact, they've been dealing with this, I think, on some of the learning and discovery channels. Now, these are the channels that always come on and say that Christianity, they reduce it down to a man-made religion, lump it together with all the other primitive, superstitious religions, and say science has discovered this, and then they'll flip over and start getting into UFOs and so forth and so on, and almost giving credibility to what you see on the magazine, news magazines, the scandal magazines, and so forth like that.
Right, now you have weekly TV shows like the X-Files that deal mainly with UFOs and phenomena of that kind. On Channel 13 here, you have sightings comes on every day, I believe a couple of times. So it's very prevalent in our culture today.
Well, Bill Al-Nour, and this is something I'd forgotten to mention also the last segment, you were consulting editor or a consultant to a video called UFOs, The Hidden Truth. Now, this is something I had a chance to watch a while back, and this is a very good video.
Yes,
this is almost not your standard, I guess, Christian documentary.
No.
It just simply starts off by talking about UFOs from what I perceived originally was just a secular perspective, and then started getting into the Christian perspective on it. They started off by saying some very interesting things about UFOs, some concepts that in my physics courses I had become aware of, but I'd never heard anybody bring out on the TV and discussing these subjects, just talking about the physical impossibility, or at least strong improbability, of interstellar space travel. People don't seem to realize the physics involved, the distances involved, and they've been watching too much Star Trek, essentially, my opinion, where there's no discernment from the point of view of physics. But anyway, getting off that, Bill, I guess let's talk about UFOs themselves before getting into the connection with Christianity and the spiritual connection. What are UFOs? Are we really seeing, or at least thinking we're seeing, interspace or interstellar travelers?
Well, the position I take is that UFOs are real, but they're not necessarily interplanetary or from different star systems. In fact, chances are, more than just chances, but I do not believe that they are. I believe that there's two main schools within what we call ufology. There's the one system of school that says that these are nuts and bolts machines from a different world. And then there's the other school that seems to be smaller. It's much smaller in the United States. And that is the interdimensional school that say that UFOs are real, but they're from a different dimension. We don't know much about this dimension, but they could even be from a spiritual dimension. And I say, bingo, that's it. I think that all the evidence leads to that UFOs are really being seen. There's something like more than 15 million Americans that have seen a UFO.
And they're not just seeing things. These are not illusions that they're seeing. And I guess the position you're also taking is that they're not seeing somebody else's space shuttle. They are seeing something that would be interdimensional or perhaps spiritual.
That's correct. A good way of putting it is UFOs comes from the realm of shadows, so to speak. It comes from the realm of poltergeists and ghosts and spiritual things like that. And I contend, and I developed this, and I think I've proven it conclusively in my book, that if you understand what demonology is, you know what UFOs are, because they're from the same realm. And what is the purpose behind UFOs? Well, look at what their messages say. The very first thing they want to do, they want humankind to do, is change the way we think about God. Very interesting. Why would anyone go millions and millions of miles just to try to influence the way a culture perceives God as? Why do they always attack the person, nature, and work of Jesus Christ? Not sometimes. They always do. You know, sometimes the attack is less subtle. A lot of them talk about Jesus, but they always say he was the latest great avatar, and they put him in the same class as Buddha or Muhammad or others. Or some of them will come right out and say that, well, Lucifer and Jesus really are brothers, something like Mormonism. So what we see in the field of ufology is very, very spiritual. And the reason that I called it UFOs in the New Age is that basically ufology has become pretty much a religion in and of itself, and it mirrors the religion of the New Age movement.
Now, at this point, we're kind of getting beyond simply sightings. We're getting into what's often called encounters, or as one author's put it, communion, which is a pretty deep subject. So I want to talk about that, but before we do, and before we go to this next break, we have a caller on the line. Jonet, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, it's okay, Jonet.
Jonet, I'm sorry.
Welcome to the program, Jonet.
What can we do for you?
I was just listening to the clip and the lady, that y'all had on there.
Yes.
And that poor lady, she needs prayer and Christian counseling. She's being attacked by seducing familiar spirits. And, I don't know who that was who was laughing at her, and picking at her, but the lady is sick, and she's delusional, and she needs Christian counseling. Because I know a few people that have been through that before. But when I got underneath Christian counseling and pastoral care, I was healed.
Jonet brings up an interesting aspect of this whole thing, the idea of demon possession. I mean, of course, we're actually starting to talk about the correlation between UFOs and demons and the spiritual realm and so forth. So after we get back from this break, we're going to be talking about close encounters of the third kind, first kind. In fact, we'll probably get into what
I think there's 5 kinds.
Yeah, there's like 5 kinds. We'll get into what all 5 of those different encounters are and how you can avoid them. Bill, before we went to the break, we were just starting to get into or go beyond
what is a UFO and getting into what is the classifications.
Well, exactly. Getting away from the difference between a sighting and an actual encounter. And, of course, there are several different encounters. There are first close encounters of the first kind, fourth kind, fifth kind, whatever. Bill, what are these different... we were speculating there's like 5 different kinds of encounters. What are these and what defines them?
Well, they were, this categorization was formulated by the late Dr. Allen Hynek. He was considered the grandfather of ufology, of modern ufology. And he was a scientist, I think University of Colorado, and he said that in his study of UFOs, they could be divided into 4 categories, and then a 5th one was added a little bit later. But a close encounter of the first kind, close encounter, of course, with UFO, a close encounter of the first kind is the mere seeing of a UFO at close range. A close encounter of the second kind is a close sighting that leaves physical evidence of a landing. Close encounter of a third kind is a close sighting that includes seeing a humanoid creature from the spacecraft. Close encounter of the fourth kind is an abduction by the UFO. And the 5th kind, I forget what that is, but I think it's even...
a very intimate encounter.
Yes.
I think the 5th kind is contact through metaphysical or occult means.
That's correct. That's correct. I forgot what that was. That was added later, and I don't think Allen Hynek added that one.
And then there's also a 6th, deaths or injuries related to contacts or sightings.
Yes, and that was another one that was added fairly recently. But the first 4 were the only ones that Hynek had designated before his death. But that's basically, in ufology, all those categories are talked about from time to time, and that's basically it.
Okay. One of the things that I've noticed is that every reporting of a UFO, they've always only been able to track them inside the atmosphere. They've never actually tracked one coming into the atmosphere, which to me would indicate that it may be some kind of dimensional type craft.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. However, people get around that by saying that maybe they have a way of stealthing their approach to the planet or something like that. But the facts are the facts. There has been no traditional sighting via radar or anything of that nature of any kind of flying saucer or UFO at all coming from inside the solar system into the atmosphere of planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another designation that I believe that they are interdimensional or multidimensional.
Right.
It's interesting. They behave in ways that ordinary craft simply cannot behave. There's reports of them vanishing like Cheshire cats, splitting into two, turning at thousands of miles an hour, 90-degree angles, which would splatter anyone along the walls of the inside of a spacecraft if they were going that rapidly when they did that.
In other words, we're not talking about simply a great feat of a highly advanced civilization. We're talking about a physical impossibility. The laws of physics will not allow such things to take place, no matter how mechanically or technologically advanced you become.
That's correct. They have a kind of trickster. They play the role of a trickster in so many ways. We just can't understand the way they're acting. And when I began researching my book, one thing that surprised me, we hear a lot about UFOs and we think they're somewhat a current phenomena. But the more I got into this, the more I realized that these are not just a current phenomena. They've been with us since the beginning of history itself.
Right.
There's all kinds of reports going back even BC and ancient Egyptian kings seeing them and that type of thing.
Okay, Alexander the Great. Even they reported his armies whenever they were in war that they were harassed by several UFOs, and that most of the men had run off into the sea, but some of the more sturdier of the men had actually fired arrows at it and so forth. Then you also have Columbus, who also reported that he saw a UFO just several hours before he found land.
Yeah, that's correct. Also in the Roman Empire, they had reports of flying shields going throughout the whole empire. So there's a trickster mentality to these things. And the modern era of ufology began in 1947 when a man by the name of Kenneth Arnold saw 9 discs skipping above him in the sky, and he was flying an airplane at the time. But one thing that I find interesting, with all these sightings that we've had since that time, why is it that we don't know one inch more about UFOs today than we did back in 1947?
Right.
That's the trickster nature of these things. One of the reasons they're there, and I believe they're spiritual and I believe they're demonic, is that they focus our attention on the skies and the possibility of aliens in outer space instead of focusing our attention on the God who made the skies.
Well, one other thing that I wanted to throw in about space travel is because of the nature of space, with all the debris that is in space and the gas clouds, you could theorize that it would probably be next to impossible to travel at any high rate of speed, much less the speed of light, to go anywhere, because the craft would be completely ripped apart. You know, just going through these gas clouds and the different gravitational fields and all of the debris that they would have to deal with.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But again, I don't want to downplay that comment at all, because a lot of people today watch Star Trek, you know, and I watch it myself. And the idea around Star Trek is, well, they can put shields around their craft. So that's the way the UFO people, the ones that really advocate this nuts and bolts theory, get around it, saying, well, with our technology that's true, but certainly in the future they're much more advanced. But the fact of the matter is that these things act demonic, is what they act like. They don't act anything like civilized people from another solar system or another planet would act if they were exploring here.
Now, this isn't just something that's just like a hobby either. There are people from all walks of life that are involved with this. I believe the Mutual UFO Network is their headquarters located just down the road from here in Austin in Lampasas, Texas. And they have an international email network for people to report sightings. You have all the different television shows, conventions, groups. There's even a regular meeting here in Austin for people who supposedly have been abducted by UFOs to share their experiences with other people.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's interesting. I documented this in my book. Someone asked me, why did you write about such an obscure topic? Well, the fact of the matter is it's not obscure anymore.
Right.
The Gallup organization several years ago did a poll of what Americans' attitudes were towards UFOs. And it turns out that not only do more than 50% of Americans believe in UFOs, but they believe they're being piloted by aliens from another world. So that's more than half of the population believes that they're here and they're operating here for some purpose. So, and plus, I think Hollywood has had an awful lot to do with this phenomena getting better and better known all the time.
Okay.
And you're right. You are in kind of a hotbed of UFO activity with the Mutual UFO Network being there.
Right.
That's a fairly good scientific group. There's nothing new age about that group. They try to study UFOs from a scientific perspective. And of course, I think it was Austin was where Whitley Strieber was from, if I'm not mistaken, the author of Communion. He talks about Austin, I think, in his book.
Right. He was originally from Austin, then I believe he moved to up into the East Coast from here.
Okay. We're coming up on a break, and we need to go ahead and take that because coming up after this, we'll be speaking to some people that have called in. We'll be talking to Alan, Dwayne, and Rick about UFOs. You're listening to Christian Answers Live. I'm Lee Meckley along with Jim Tungate. We're talking about UFOs this afternoon, and want to also let you know that we're going to be extending this discussion into the next hour. So we'll be spending both hours this afternoon talking about UFOs. We have a number of people who have called in, and we're going to be getting to those people in just a little bit. But right now we do have a guest in the studio, Larry Wessels, who is the director of Christian Answers. Larry, how are you doing this afternoon?
Oh, I'm doing just great, Lee. It's great to be with you and Jim here in the studio, especially with our outstanding guest that we have, Bill Alnor. Read his books. I thought he was great, and I want to pat myself on the back for recommending that he be here today. And I think
yes.
This is definitely our most popular show, and I had fun listening to all of Bill Alnor's debate tapes last night at work, thereby getting some of these clips that the whole audience has the benefit of hearing. And I'll make this quick and get the show right back to you and Bill and everybody, but just wanted to mention to everybody out there, you don't realize how close we came to having this as our last radio broadcast.
Yes, very close.
If it weren't for the grace of, Gene Bender, thank goodness for him, the station manager.
I'd really like to extend my thanks to him because he's probably at this point probably our biggest donor. He has been, people don't realize that, again, this is not an outreach of KIXL. We pay them for this time, and he has been very gracious in making terms with us as far as...
Exactly, allowing this show to continue because we were really all prepared to make this our final show, and really it comes down to just needing funds. We need, we do the best we can paying out of our own pockets, but sometimes it helps if some other people could maybe join in with us in this joint mission field to reach the world for Christ. And I know there's a burden on everybody out there, all the Christians out there, to help all kinds of ministries and things, and we're not really trying to, how should I say it, bug in or something on people giving to their local church or anything. But if they've got a few dollars and they'd like to see this kind of programming continue, it'd sure help our ministry if we could get a little financial help to keep us going. And I just wanted to mention before we turn it back over that we do have we're just now starting in an effort to do just that, to get a little help. And we're starting something called a Tape of the Month Club for those who will support this ministry on a regular basis. A gift of $10 or more a month entitles the supporter to a free Christian Answers live audio cassette each month. For instance, if you gave $10 to help us and you'd really like this show, for instance, we'd send you an audio cassette copy of this particular show with Bill Al-Nour and UFOs. And of course, you'll also get an automatic subscription to the Christian Answers Journal and any miscellaneous Christian Answers mailouts that may arise. Regular support is the backbone to any ministry, and we hope we can count on those of you who believe in what we're doing. And of course, once again, I'd like to mention you can help us also by just calling in to our phone number at 873-0113. That's 873-0113. And we do accept Visa and MasterCard, and you just need to leave your card number, your phone number, the card expiration date, and mailing address. And, of course, we'll send you that tape, and we can add you to the mailing list and all the rest. And, of course, as the show goes on, you'll get to hear our mailing address and things. We'd love to get some letters and things and hear from you all out there.
And if you haven't read that journal, you need to take a look at it. It's very, very good.
Well, I'll probably pop back in later in the show. I'm going to let you get back to Bill and the callers, and keep up the great work, guys.
Okay, Larry Wessels, Director of Christian Answers, and we are going to talk to Bill. We were talking about UFOs and close encounters. I want to go to Alan. He has a comment about UFOs. Go ahead, Alan.
Okay, thanks. I have two questions for Bill. One, I agree with him that many of the manifestations of these UFOs are from the spirit world and let's say demon world. But I don't think all of them. Some of them might be angelic. And for example, what about the Star of Bethlehem? I mean, could that not have been some kind of an angelic UFO that, you know, it wasn't actually a big sun, I mean, a star like our sun, but it could have been just a kind of a mysterious light that was maybe only 1,000 feet up in the air or something, or you know what I mean? We're told about it. It could be classified as a UFO, and also, when the Israelites were going through the wilderness, wasn't there some kind of a light leading them?
There's a pillar of fire by day, and a pillar of fire by night, and a cloud by day.
Yeah. So couldn't these be considered UFOs and of an angelic type? Let's say good spirits. You know, the spirits of that are in harmony with God. And
okay, Bill, what's your response to that?
Well, I think the first point he made is well taken. I mean, however, it wouldn't, if it was the Star of Bethlehem, if that was caused by angels, which it might have been, we can concede that, but it didn't look like any kind of spacecraft. The Bible simply says it was a star. They saw his star, you know, so whether or not it was some kind of light, we don't know, put there. It was definitely put there by God. Whether it was angelic in nature, we don't know, but we do know this, that it didn't look like a spacecraft or a saucer. It looked like a star, whatever it was. Okay, so I think that was well taken. And the second point about the guiding the Israelites out of Egypt,
right?
It talked about a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day, or maybe it's vice versa. I'm not really sure. But again, there's no indication of a craft. Now, when we use the term UFO today, what we're usually talking about is people seeing some kind of a ship. But technically, you're right. Any kind of thing that we can't identify would be a UFO. But generally speaking, when we talk about the term today, we're talking about flying saucers.
Okay.
Ships that people think are ships, like with beings inside of them.
Since we're kind of on this topic, what about a scripture that always is tried to use to prove that the Bible speaks of UFOs is in Ezekiel?
Yeah, the book of Ezekiel, chapter 1, talks about this contraption coming down. There's a couple things that I wrote about that in my book. First of all, it wasn't really a sighting. This was a vision Ezekiel was given by God. And a lot of people don't know this, but it was repeated in Revelation chapter 4, which shows a real interesting link between the two, Ezekiel and the book of Revelation. It talks about different faces. But you really have to be dishonest, I think, to try to read a flying saucer into that account. Various pulp fiction writers have tried to do that. Von Däniken is one of them. That this was some kind of a flying saucer, but there's no indication. As he was saying, there's portals on it, and you can hear the sound of the engine. There's no indication of any of those things. I just think he was playing around with the text.
Well, okay. Thank you very much for your call, Al. We do need to move along. I want to talk to Dwayne and see what Dwayne has to say.
How are you doing?
Just fine. How are you?
Doing all right. Hey, I was calling because I saw that show. I think I saw it on Pagan Invasion.
The UFOs Hidden the Truth video?
And the thing I noticed when they were talking about hypnosis, and I noticed, in real life, that people's minds are easily manipulated by television, by what they read, what they call propaganda, and, they can brainwash people and things like that. And I wanted to know, just for instance, say with the Catholics. The Catholics and their religion are taught to believe in, to pray to different saints and to pray to the Virgin Mary. So they end up seeing these visions of statues bleeding and tears coming from statues that other, Christians who don't believe the way they believe never ever see. And that seems like mind manipulation of the mind because they are taught that, then they end up believing it. And also, does that have anything to do with hypnosis? Because I know they brought up hypnosis on the show, saying that they really don't know what's behind hypnosis, and they say that you could hypnotize someone, tell them that they have a cat in their lap, and they'll start playing with it and playing with it, and then they'll say that the cat scratched them, and then they'll actually get a mark on their arm where a cat appeared to have scratched them. And I want to know, can anyone be hypnotized, or is it just people that believe?
Yeah, that's specifically in the video. They were saying that they're hypnotizing people in order to, so they could remember these encounter experiences. We're out of time for this hour, but we will be talking about this next hour. And Dwayne, thanks for your call. We'll be specifically getting Bill to answer your question for you about hypnosis and about brainwashing and so forth, and how it relates to this phenomenon. The phenomenon is UFOs.
Hello, listeners. This is Larry Wessels, Director of Christian Answers. I'm just interjecting at this point on the tape to let you know that we've had a slight technical difficulty in regards to the second hour of the program with Bill Al-Nour on UFOs. What we've discovered here in the recording process is that our master audio cassette that recorded the second hour did not make as good a recording for the second hour as it had done for the first hour. So unfortunately, we can't do much about it. This is the only recording we have of the program, and the sound quality will fluctuate a little bit, but at least you will still be able to hear everything. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to explain what had happened here. The problem is not on your audio cassette as you listen to this second hour of the program. The problem was on our master cassette that recorded the show. It had this problem, and since it's the only one that exists, we're kind of stuck with it. But we hope you bear with us and enjoy the second hour of the show. God bless.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Christian Answers Live. I'm Lee Meckley, Director of Radio Outreach, along with Jim Tungate, who is our Director of Research and Editor of the Christian Answers Journal. We're speaking this afternoon about UFOs. UFOs, Close Encounters, Communion, as one author has called it. Sounds scary to me. We're speaking with Bill Al-Nour. And as we said last hour, Bill is an award-winning journal, author, and cult expert. Has written more than 500 magazine articles on religious cults, the New Age movement, and Satanism. Very prolific writer. He's also executive director of the North American Fellowship, Evangelical Ministries to New Religions, or EMNR. And as Jim had pointed out, he's also founder and president of Eastern Christian Outreach, or ECHO. This is a East Coast based Christian apologetics and cult evangelism ministry. And again, UFOs and so forth.
Let's get back to our illustrious guest, Bill Al-Nour, and this incredible topic of UFOs.
Yes, and Bill, before we went to the break last hour, we were talking with Dwayne, who was specifically mentioning hypnosis and brainwashing and so forth like that. Of course, the video, UFOs, The Hidden Truth, very good video, by the way. We have been running that on cable access. Talked about people who had these encounters, and then these encounters were being brought out by hypnosis in the course of this
regression.
Yes, and in the course of this, that was being this trance or whatever they were being put in, they would recall these experiences. Bill, what is your comment on that?
Well, I find it fascinating that there's hardly anyone that had an alleged UFO experience that can remember it. It always has to be brought out of their mind through hypnosis. And I've studied hypnosis quite a bit, and a lot of it is directly related to the occult. So what we have here, I think, is the possibility of demonic interference.
Mm-hmm.
And I find so many times that whenever people are unsaved and they want to see a UFO, well, Satan will allow them to see a UFO. And I think that this is a similar type of thing. If it was a real experience, people would remember it.
But Bill, hypnosis is used by psychologists. They know everything. Is this true? Is hypnosis actually part of the occult?
I believe it is. I think that a lot of it is, but I think that there's a danger in even dabbling with it, because you're touching the mechanisms of the mind, and the mind is very suggestible. If Satan can get Jesus to see all the kings of the world in a vision, or if Satan can plant things to our minds, evil thoughts or evil impulses, certainly he can put evil images into people's minds. And so a lot of people have the same images of aliens and space creatures and things like that. In addition, we have the whole specter of abductions being played up so big in the media right now. Most people in the back of their minds have an idea that aliens look all the same. They're little and gray and have big eyes, you know? I find it fascinating that the same types of creatures were always perceived throughout history, except back then, let's say in the medieval ages, people knew what they were. They were demons. They were elves. They were gnomes. They were also little. Today, the only difference is that they're in two-piece jumpsuits, and they claim to come out of flying saucers.
Well, now, okay, so you're not saying that all of the abduction experiences can be explained away by simply saying these are thoughts that are put in these people's minds through the process of hypnosis. You're saying that there actually is, I guess, valid abduction experiences, although it's not what people think it is.
Well, I don't even know if I would go that far. I think some people claim to have been abducted, but when you ask for hard proof of it, there just isn't any proof of it. Now, there have been some cases where people have passed lie detector tests and things like that, but that doesn't mean that they had a legitimate abduction experience, that they were literally taken bodily onto a flying saucer and taken into some kind of operating room. But I do know this. I did an appendix, a whole chapter at the end of my book, on a person who was very prominent in the New York City area who was abducted. He claimed he had been abducted a number of times by aliens. And later, he became frightened because he seemed to be losing control of his faculties as the years went by. And he realized that whatever he was dabbling with was somehow demonic, because he was involved with it with hypnosis and everything else. And he realized that he felt that he was demon-possessed. And he actually had an exorcism performed on him. And now he says that, he did have memories brought out in hypnosis, but he believes that he never was aboard a UFO. He believes it was all false and all demonic.
Now, I received your book yesterday, and by the way, I really appreciate you sending it to me. I didn't get a chance to read all of it, but I did read through most of it. And I want to highly recommend this to everybody in our listening audience. And Bill, why don't you go ahead and give your phone number and your address so that people can get in touch with you to get this book. And also, you also carry the video, UFOs, The Hidden Truth, as well. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's a real fine resource for churches, the video as well. My address is, my ministry's name is Eastern Christian Outreach, and that's Post Office Box 11322, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19137. My phone number is area code 215-289-7885.
And you also have a newsletter as well.
Yes, we produce the Christian Sentinel newsletter. If people write us, it's not really a newsletter anymore, it's a full magazine, but if people write to us, we'll put them on our mailing list. We give out a free one-year subscription.
And I think there's an article in it on the holy laughter phenomenon. I don't know if that was this last issue or the...
That was September '94.
Okay.
Go to press again with our next one, but we were among the first ministries to really take a real aim at this so-called laughing revival. And I find it interesting. I mean, I network with cult ministries all over the world right now. There's not a single discernment or cult ministry that embraces this movement as a legitimate move of God. It is very much a counterfeit movement. And the fellow that's brought this into the church, Rodney Howard Brown, he's a South African, and he's packing out halls everywhere across the world, everywhere across America right now, too. He has a very, very unclear view of Jesus Christ. He says that Jesus Christ, when he was on earth, lost his divinity, and he got it back when he went back to heaven. So here we have what I consider to be a possible, probable even, heretic bringing in a movement, and people think it's of the Holy Spirit.
Now, I've just thought of an interesting correlation here. I noticed in the video they talked about an encounter that this gentleman had on a farm where he walked outside and he had like I believe it was a shotgun, and he saw two little 4-foot furry aliens, and that he had fired at them and that they kept coming, and that whenever his family walked outside, he was on the ground barking like a dog, and that he had actually attacked his own dog. And then we also find that in this holy laughter movement, that in the vineyard churches, there are people who are barking like dogs.
That's correct, and I went to a vineyard church recently, and I witnessed this myself. I mean, I've heard some of it on the radio and things like that, but to me it was one of the most shocking things I've seen, because if any unbeliever would have walked into that service, they would have walked out and thought they were all crazy. And the Bible, in fact, specifically addresses that everything should be done in decency and in order. And it was one of the most revolting sights I've seen. I mean, people just rolling around, and you know, it was unbelievable.
I'm Lee Meckley, along with Jim Tungate. We're talking about UFOs this afternoon, trying to talk about the encounters that you quite often hear about on the TV and get the truth out, separate it from all of the chaff, so to speak. And we've had several people that have been wanting to get in on the conversation who've been waiting patiently. Ruth is calling long distance, so we want to go ahead and get to her. Ruth, what is your comment?
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Oh, I thought you were going to take the other guy first.
Well, you're long distance, so we thought we'd save you a nickel.
Okay, thank you. No, I've had my own experience with the UFOs, and once you see one, they are immediate attention getters.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine.
Yeah, that happened back in the 50s, and it followed all the way through until...
This was your experience?
Yeah. I saw the first ones I saw were in Missouri as a group. It went overhead. I was out walking the dog, and they went right overhead, and were rather low. One large one and surrounded by the three smaller ones, and of course it was an attention getter. There was no sound, and it just caught my attention, and I started researching it. Mm-hmm. And read everything I could get a hold of, and joined the group that the Lorenzens put out of Tucson, and to kind of keep up on all the information coming in. Well, the more I got into it, the more I saw of it. And I did see a number of sightings. We were camped on the top of Mount Lemmon one night in
You have had a close encounter of the first kind.
Yeah, that's all. I never had anything further. Thank God for that. But I got scared to death in Arizona when they stopped in midair. I thought I was watching jets on a practice run, but I couldn't hear anything. But I wasn't paying that much attention until they stopped in midair. Three of them stopped, and I felt like I was being watched. And that scared me enough to do a little more digging than I had been doing. Right. I was interested in the occult, and that's exactly how it started, I think.
Okay.
Because I was interested got interested. Somebody gave us a Ouija board. And that thing scared the daylights out of me one night, too, and I just got rid of it. I said, it was frightening. I didn't know it was something beyond my control. And the rest of the family were fascinated. They wanted me to play, and I said, I refused. I said, there's more to that than just a game.
So what conclusions have you come to as a result?
I've come to the conclusion that it's strictly demonic. I don't think it's anything else but demonic. The angels of God would not do what these things do.
Bill, what's your comment to all this?
Well, I think we have an example of someone who knows, who's been there, who's seen them, and knows that there's a link between Ouija boards and the occult. And really, occult dabbling leads often to UFO contact. And I appreciate what she said about stopping in midair. It kind of illustrated what I said. They're doing things in the sky that no craft would do of any sort would do the things they're doing.
Ruth, anything else?
Well, I would say this. I got rid of them, totally. When I got rid of the occult in my life.
The UFOs, you stopped seeing the UFO?
I never saw another one after that.
Interesting.
That's great. There is really a firm link between the two. In fact, ufology is the occult, as far as I'm concerned.
That's definitely the way I feel about it.
Now, are you a Christian now, Ruth?
Oh, yes, I have been all my life. And when I got into this, the Ouija board and that, nobody thought anything much about that. There was no warning about it. I didn't even think about it. Until I got into Corinthians, and I think it's Corinthians, where they burned all their
it's Acts, yes.
Acts, where they burned all of the books and all of the witchcraft things that they had. And that kind of triggered it into my head, too, that I had better get rid of this.
Yes.
And I got rid of all the books I had on it. I threw everything out that dealt with the occult. I just don't want any part of it in my house. When anybody asks me about it, I simply tell them stay away from it, because it can be dangerous. I was getting in deeper and deeper, and the UFOs were part of this. And once I finally got rid of all of this stuff and got it out of my... And I needed some rather strong prayers to do it. And not just from myself. I couldn't do it on my own. I had to have help. I had to go into a prayer circle. For the prayers for me.
Sure.
And after that, I never saw another UFO.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for calling, Ruth. We have to move along to callers. Got a break coming up here before too long. Rick, thank you very much for your patience. What's your input on this?
Well, let's see. One is, I've noticed, personal observation, Christians don't seem to see UFOs. I know I haven't.
I haven't either.
And the other one had to do with, was related to variants reported of the types of beings or entities encountered worldwide.
The varying reports of you mean as far as the description of the beings, or?
Yeah, different types. It's like here in South America, probably the little gray humanoids with the big eyes and big heads.
Mm-hmm. Northern
Europe, they seem to be very, very human, almost too human, superhuman, you might say. And the strangest ones, seems what I've heard, are the Mediterranean types, which are reptilian. If you want to, you can even relate that to medieval times when people were encountering gargoyles.
Yeah.
That was pretty much what I wanted to cover.
Okay, well, thank you very much for calling.
Thanks for your call, Rick.
Bill, what various descriptions of the beings encountered? What's the story with that?
Well, worldwide there's about 6 or 7 major varieties of the beings that people are allegedly seeing. However, the grays seem to have been seen worldwide, and that's the most common type that we see allegedly in the Western world. They're the little grays with big eyes. There's all kinds of strange theories of why that's so.
Of course, the response, I guess, would be that maybe they're seeing actually beings from different planets. And that brings me to a question I wanted to throw in real quick. What are you saying about life on other planets? Is that something that biblically we can say is completely untrue, or the Bible leaves that possibility open? There's been several Christian people. Yeah, Dr. Martin, if I'm not mistaken, believed that there certainly was a possibility of life on other planets. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, that's the position that I take. But I know this, and I address this specifically. First of all, it's not heretical at all to believe that there could be life elsewhere.
Right.
But there are deeper theological issues when you begin thinking that way, and that is that, well, if the Bible seems to say the universe fell, is there sin on other planets? And then there's the issue of Christ's atonement. In the 1960s, in an old Star Trek, there's a specter of the Enterprise going to some other planet, and there was the Son of God there, too, presumably, dying for the sins of the world, although it wasn't specific about that. Certainly.
Right.
But it brings in complex theological questions. But the more I began looking into this, and I saw so much chicanery in the area of UFOs, I'm generally negative towards that possibility, but I'm leaving the door open. Let's put it that way. In other words, it's possible, but I don't really. I see so much chicanery in the name of science fiction or in the name of aliens that I just I just think that it's not likely. Let's put it that way.
Right. I want to backtrack for just a minute and go back to the variant reportings of the different forms of aliens. What about these men in black? That supposedly show up a couple days after you've seen the UFO. They're dressed in all black. They appear in black helicopters with no markings, wearing sunglasses and little fedora hats.
Yeah. Well, there's in ufology, it's a very contradictory science, if you can even call it that. And the legends of the men in black came out of a book in the 1950s called "They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers." And there's really nothing to it. It's just one paranoid man wrote this book, and the rumor never dies. It's almost like the Procter & Gamble rumor never dying. It's kind of that thing. So there have been different people that said that after they began looking into flying saucers that they were followed and spotted and that kind of thing by these men, but I don't think there's anything to it. Now, if there is something to it, I believe that it is demonic. The reason I say that is when I started looking into UFOs, I talked to John Keel, and he's not a Christian, and the very first thing he told, and he believes they're demonic, and he's not a Christian at all. And he said to me, be careful when you're messing around this area, because you're going to start experiencing poltergeist activity, and the phone's ringing without any reason whatsoever, and you're going to start feeling you're being followed. And I just feel that if there's something going on like that, it's a demonic interference, because you're dealing with the realm of demons when you're dealing with UFOs.
Okay.
Now, didn't Jacques Vallée, who is also one of the foremost experts on UFOs, come to basically the same conclusion that we have, that they are demonic?
Yes, he did, and he's also not a Christian. It's interesting. That's where the facts lead. The facts do not lead toward the nuts and bolts theory that they're nuts and bolts machines from another world. They lead to the fact that these things are somehow spiritual in nature, and he thinks that they're spiritual in nature, and they're designed to control or to change the way the whole world's thinking about certain areas. So that's rather a chilling statement that he says that, but he's very, very clear on that. He wrote the book, he wrote a number of books, UFOs, Messengers of Deception. One of his recent books is called Confrontations, and he's trying to dispel the notion that we're supposed to have communion with these things. Because in his book Confrontations, he traces worldwide the fact that there have been more than 200 cases of UFO injuries brought upon people and at least 12 cases of death. So what he's saying is this is extremely dangerous stuff, and I agree with him.
Good afternoon. The show is Christian Answers Live. The hosts are Lee Meckley and Jim Tungate. The subject is UFOs. We're talking with Bill Al-Nour, who has a lot to say on the subject.
Now, before we went to the break, a lady called, and she had a question about the book of Genesis in chapter 6, where it speaks of the corruption of mankind. And I just want to go ahead and read that. It says, "Now it came about when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and the daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they choose." Now, in the video, UFOs, The Hidden Truth, I.D.E. Thompson, is it Thompson or Thomas?
Thomas,
put forth the idea that the Hebrew word is, I believe it's Nephitili, could mean fallen angels.
What's your take on that, Bill?
Well, I didn't get into this too much in my book, but I think that I.D.E. Thomas has a fascinating theory. And the reason I didn't get into it very much is that it deals a lot with speculation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's fascinating speculation, and he thinks that, and his book is called The Omega Conspiracy, and he believes that UFOs is somehow tied into an end times delusion that involves the reappearance of the Nephilim on planet Earth. He believes that they could be involved with some kind of delusion, experimenting even perhaps with the daughters of men, because in the UFO experiments we have a lot of sexual experiments going on right now. I think it's good speculation, and I think that, and I personally do believe that there's something to the argument that the UFO delusion could be part of an end times delusion meant to fool all humanity.
Yeah, I've kind of developed my own little theory about that. Using the premise that, say whenever the rapture does take place, the Antichrist is going to need a way to explain what happened to all those people. And kind of my own little pet theory is that the Antichrist will say that, well, they were abducted by UFOs, and that I've already, maybe signed a treaty with them, and that I can protect you from them.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's fascinating to me, and I'm not really that big in end times. My first book was exposing a lot of end times teachers for sensationalism. It was called Soothsayers, the Second Advent. But I found that a major stream in UFO literature is dealing with the end times. It's dealing with the fact that there's going to be a big cleansing coming upon planet Earth, and all those people that don't go along with the New Age are going to be taken and removed. Now, you follow that a step further, and if the rapture occurs, what we might see is, well, I won't be here when it occurs, after it occurs, but they will have a built-in explanation for the rapture after that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is absolutely fascinating, because they're all set up for something like that to happen, and they'll think the wicked people will be removed, and actually it'll be the Christians that will be removed.
Well, we want to continue along the lines of what the Bible has to say about this phenomenon. Right now we have a caller on the line, Marie.
Yes, hello.
Okay. What's your comment?
Well, comment and question. Thank you, gentlemen.
Sure.
I'm a 34-year-old woman, and I have a couple of kids, and I'm happily married. I'm a pretty strong Christian. I could be a little more founded in the Word, but when I was young, I exposed myself to a lot of different things, and I got a pretty wild imagination. A lot of scary movies and sexual promiscuity and junk like that, and there was even times when I was smoking pot and doing stuff like that, and I was pretty paranoid, and I remember hearing some weird sounds under my bed once and stuff. I had some paranoid problems. Anyway, since I've come to the Lord, I've pretty much doused a lot of those and was anyway, when I expose myself to something stupid on TV, like watching something scary that I shouldn't have or something, and I go to sleep, then my kids usually get disturbed at night. And anyway, I am wondering, as a Christian, I'm not really super charismatic to the point where I will say, you know, I rebuke you devils, get out of here, you know, whatever. And a lot of times I don't think it's devils because, you know, the flesh is also what we war against, you know, and it was my own fault for watching something that I knew would cause fear, you know, in my heart and stuff. And so I'm just wondering if, you know, what kind of approach can I take when I'm battling with things? And that's a real mild one, a scary dream in the middle of the night for me, and then my kids being disturbed. You know, I mean, I've had some pretty radical ones, too. And I think it's also God's way of chastising me and kind of giving me a little lesson of showing me, okay, look, you know, what you expose yourself to is going to have some, you know, fruit.
Bill?
I think when something like that happens, you need to just stop everything and get into God's Word. I mean, if you're very restless, certainly pray right away and ask the Lord to take the fear from you. But when I have, and I don't have many experiences like that, but I have different types of experiences when I'm overwhelmed with too much to do and I worry about it. I don't really worry, but I'm very concerned about things. And I'll get up and pray and start reading God's Word, and that calms me right down. So I think it's just a matter of just relying on God's promises and just realizing, as it says, the Bible says in Romans, that all things work together for the good for those who love God. And so I think you just have to claim His promises.
Right, and it could also be that your children are picking up on your agitation.
Marie, are you still there?
I am, and thank you.
Does that help?
That's the power to save. That's the truth. Thank you, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Christian Answers Live. I'm Lee Meckley along with Jim Tungate. This is our final segment. We want to get right back into the conversation. If you want to join us, 447-KIXL, that's 447-5495. And Bill, I guess a lot of this maybe didn't start with this, but it seemed to really pick up with the book that came out, I guess, back in the 70s, Chariots of the Gods, where the whole UFO phenomenon was kind of combined with a very aberrant view of the Bible to create this emulsion that has become very popular since then. What is your take on people who would try to combine Scripture with or I guess religion in general, with UFOs? What?
Well, I'm very critical of it. Let's just look at Chariots of the Gods. Eric von Daniken was the author, and that book was translated into dozens of languages and sold 42 million copies. But if you really look at von Daniken's record, it later turned out that a lot of his so-called evidence that he listed in that book, and it was evidence that he claimed that, let's say, the Ark of the Covenant was a radio transmitter, and a lot of the miracles in the Bible can be explained by alien contact. And he looked at lines in South America and said this is an ancient landing strip. It turns out that some of the materials that he produced as proof in that book were absolutely outright frauds or hoaxes. And it later turned out that while von Daniken wrote that book, he was in prison on a conviction for forgery. So the man has a background of being less than honest. But the Bible really doesn't have anything at all to say about UFOs, but it does have an awful lot to say about spiritual deception. And it has an awful lot to say about going along with things that seem to undermine the person, nature, and work of Jesus Christ. And in chapter 1 of my book, I write this, that part of the UFO enigma is the story of deception. And we need to look at 1 John 4, 1-3. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether or not they are from God. When you look at the so-called messages, the channeled messages by and large, and by the way, channeling is wrong, the Bible calls it spiritism.
Right.
You'll see that every message from an alleged alien always undermines the person, nature, or work of Jesus Christ.
Right.
So we need to apply the Jesus test to all these experiences, and we need to realize that ufology, and especially when we get into the New Age angle of it, when we're dealing with channeled messages, that is Antichrist. It is really a religion in and of itself, and they're trying to develop one world religion, and they're trying to get us to change the way we think about God.
Now, you mentioned channeling in there, and obviously the UFO or ufology has been mixed heavily with New Age. Specifically, wanted to ask you about the Urantia Book. This is something that a lot of people may or may not be familiar with, but of course, based on, I guess, channeling. What is this book, and what is its connection with ufology?
Yeah, the Urantia Book is something like, I think it's more than 1,000 pages long, and it's really emerged as an alternative religion these days. It is a channeled book that claims to have been penned by angels, supermortal angelic beings, I think is the term that was used. And it was channeled through a man by the name of Kellogg in Chicago in the early part of this century. And I consider this to be a UFO cult, because if you look through the Urantia book, there's all kinds of stories about outer space and the nature of the universe and things like that. And we're dealing with entities that they don't know that could be akin, even though they call them supermortal angelic beings. But the bottom line is that these are extraterrestrial beings that allegedly channeled the book through this man. So, but even with that, one of the things that's fascinating to me about the Urantia book and how it matches other so-called UFO revelations is that the mission of Christ is rewritten. You have the last part of the Urantia book trying to tell us the true story of Jesus Christ's missing years, and it's absolutely occultic. And in the Urantia book, we have the atonement of Jesus Christ being voided, that he did not die on the cross for the sins of the world. And that seems to be the message of all New Age books and all books that talk about Jesus that come from a UFO perspective, that the atonement of Christ is always voided.
Now, there's another UFO cult that I'd like for you to address, and that's the Etheria Society with Dr. George King, who was a Londoner.
Yes, that is a group that's operational out in California mostly. They have underground vaults, and they have a lot of alleged UFO revelations to Dr. King on file there. But that's very
in these underground vaults.
Yes, they have with vaults like where all kinds of alleged messages, channeled messages through Dr. King from alleged aliens are stored. And Dr. George King claims to be getting these messages from beings on the planet Venus. And it's really a lot of New Age gobbledygook talking about God within you and on and on and on. So it's really one of the more exotic and bizarre of the UFO cult.
Also, who is Ashtar?
Okay, that's an interesting aspect of it. If you look at channeled messages allegedly from aliens, the most common person that claims to be giving messages to planet Earth is an entity by the name of Ashtar. You have the Ashtar Command, you have the Ashtar Guardian League, and on and on and on. Well, it was John Keel who wrote the book UFOs Operation Trojan Horse. He's not a Christian, and he says that, all you have to do is look in demonological literature, and you'll find the name Ashtar coming up all over the place. And the first place to look, he says, is look in the Bible. And you'll see that, is the Ashtar poles in the Old Testament, they were demonic, representatives of the Baal pagan worship system. So what John Keel says, and I think there's some validity to this, is he said, could it be that the same old demonic entities of ages past are also with us today in the form or in the disguise of UFOs or of aliens?
Right.
And I think it could be.
Right.
I don't think that it's much of a coincidence that Ashtar was around with the ancient Israelites, and that's one of the first things that God warned Moses about.
Well, 2 Corinthians 11:14 says, it's no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light.
Yeah, that's correct. There's many other verses like that, too. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 talks about a great delusion coming upon the earth near the end of times, and all kinds of false miracles will be occurring. And Matthew 24 talks about religious deception being one of the greatest things just prior to the second coming of Christ.
Bill, one more thing. We're unfortunately out of time. Thank you very much for being on the show. Again, how can people get a hold of your ministry?
Yeah, they can write me at the Christian Sentinel, or Eastern Christian Outreach is the name of our ministry. And it's Post Office Box 11322, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19137.
Okay. Bill, thank you very much for being on the show. And we've been talking about UFOs and the
channeling,
hidden truth,
the New
channeling,
Age
and close encounters was the word I was trying to think of with Bill Al-Nour. And Bill, I'll put you on hold. Stay on the line, and we'll talk to you in just a little bit. Larry, Jim, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you for joining us for Christian Answers Live, an outreach of Christian Answers Incorporated. We hope that you've enjoyed the show.
Check out our websites, BibleQuery.org. This site answers 7,700 Bible questions. HistoryCart.com. This site reveals early church history and doctrine, proving Roman Catholicism is not historically or doctrinally viable. MuslimHope.com. This site is a classic refutation of Islam, a counterfeit religion created by Muhammad. Free newsletters are also available.